Now, to talk more about what we've learned from the BRICS Summit, I'm joined by Yun Sun. She's a Senior Fellow and Co-Director of the East Asia Program and Director of the China Program at the Stimson Center. Welcome to the program. Good to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So the BRICS Summit has now concluded. I wanted to start by getting some of your impressions of President Xi Jinping's keynote address. What for you were the main takeaways?
I think the main takeaway is his proclamation that BRICS as an organization is now embarking on a new journey. Well, last time China hosted it was 5 years ago in Xiamen, the city of Xiamen in China. And so many things have happened in the past five years. The global geopolitics has almost completely changed. And now the world is faced with basically bipolarization between US and China, the forming of the bloc politics, and also the consequences of the Russian war in Ukraine, as well as the COVID crisis. So we're at a new place, and what is China's answer to these new situations? And I think BRICS is one of the key responses.
All right, so let's break that down. As you say, it's now, 13 years since BRICS was formed. So let's start with going by, how has it reshaped the global economy, particularly vis-a-vis the developing world? I mean, we keep talking about the alliance representing 40% of the planet's population.
Well, we have seen various cooperation mechanisms emerging from the BRICS nations. And I think in the development field, the most consequential and the most significant development is the creation of the new development bank. And that was based on the consensus of the 5 nations and the BRICS. And it's also, the funding came primarily from the five members of BRICS. And the bank also has experienced 2 rounds of expansion last year. So now it includes not only BRICS nations, but also 4 other countries from the developing field. So what we're seeing is that this is an example of South-South cooperation. It's developing countries helping developing countries, which is vastly different from the traditional view that the global South can only receive assistance and the generosity from the global North, from the developed countries. Now South-South cooperation is manifesting itself in a new way under the BRICS mechanism.
Right. And so with that comes a sense of unity, of course. Russia, as we know, one of the 5 BRICS nations, you brought it up earlier, currently under the global spotlight for its continued military action in Ukraine. How has that conflict consequentially affected the BRICS alliance?
Well, first, I want to call it an alliance because the alliance indicates military arrangement and is most importantly mutual defense. We know that mutual defense does not exist among BRICS countries, but in terms of an alignment and a joint organization that represent the common aspirations of the emerging markets and the developing countries, I think BRICS shares a lot of the, BRICS has manifested a lot of the common aspirations among the 5 countries. So for example, on the Russian war in Ukraine, China has not supported the UN Security Council resolution or the UN General Assembly resolution to condemn Russia and to call for Russia's withdrawal from Ukraine immediately. We know that India also adopts a similar position on this issue because India has a complicated relationship with Russia. And when we look at the position from South Africa and Brazil, we see some of the similar themes. So I would say that for BRICS nations, their position on the Russian war on Ukraine is almost entirely different from the Western countries. So that forms another foundation for their shared position vis-a-vis the West.
So you've got the political side of things, but what's the impact been, the crisis on trade amongst the BRICS grouping?
Well, first of all, we're seeing the economic pressure from the Russian war in Ukraine, for example, what we call the decoupling of the world. The desire by countries like the United States to expel Russia from the international financial system and to expel Russia from the international energy system. So we're seeing the consequences manifesting themselves in terms of the financial arrangement, transaction arrangement, the energy crisis, as well as the growing food crisis. And this financial and economic aspect of the Russian war in Ukraine has significant impact over all BRICS nations. So as for how the 5 nations are going to come up with a common solution, or at least a shared collective position to increase their individual bargaining power vis-a-vis the West, vis-a-vis the developed countries. I think that's a top priority. And we've seen this from the BRICS Summit this year. What China has advocated for is to strengthen the trade facilitation, strengthen the supply chain cooperation in order to prevent the world from decoupling.